Go.
Today is May 18th, 2026. We are conducting an interview for the Arizona State University Retirees Association Video History Project. We are located today in University Center B206. I am Jan Thompson, Professor Emerita of Music, and the technical support staff today include Don Doors, Chair of Video History, and Elmer Gooding, support staff. Please introduce yourself, stating your name and your rank at the time that you retired.
I'm Barry McNeill. I was assistant dean in the School of Engineering when I retired in 2006.
And I'm guessing, Barry, that you are old enough to remember early TV and a program called This Is Your Life.
Yes, Ralph Edwards.
Where there was always a guest coming on set, unbeknownst to him, about to be interviewed with memorabilia from his entire life.
Absolutely.
And that's what today is going to be like. Okay. So would you start by telling us a little bit about your early life and your family?
Okay, I was born in Denver, Colorado, 1944. I spent my early years through high school in the Denver area. I have two brothers. One's younger and one's older. My younger brother and I are adopted, and I have an older sister. And my older brother and older sister are 13 years older, 12, 13 years older than I was. Let's see, I got through through high school, and shall I just go on and
Sure. Tell us more about living in Denver. What was that like?
Well, it's very nice. It can be snowing right now in May, and it can also be beautiful. Beautiful climate. It's warm. We had a mountain cabin that we went to in the summer that my mother actually built in 1912, I think, something like that. She and her 5 brothers built this cabin, and so I was in high school. I played football. And then I did wrestling and track so that I would be ready for football. I mean, that was the rationale for why you would do some sport other than football. I had a reasonably good high school record, but I was very surprised when I applied to Stanford and got admitted to Stanford. And that's where I went for my undergraduate degree in 1962.
Wow, that's impressive. I mean, Stanford.
Yeah.
Did you apply to other schools, or did you know you wanted to go to Stanford?
I did not apply to very many schools. I applied to the Colorado School of Mines. I applied to the University of Colorado. Stanford was just it's something my mother wanted to go to when she was applying it was about 1920, 1918, something like that. But her parents were not going to have that. She was going to go to Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas, where her five brothers had gone, and that's where she was going to go. And so she's the one that really wanted me to apply to Stanford. So that's the reason I applied to Stanford.
Sounds like you had a very academic family. If your mother, that young, in the 20s, was already a college graduate, and her brothers.
Well, yeah, they were all. They were. Her mother was traveling, wrote books, and was a lawyer. And her husband was a judge, a lawyer. They met and got married in Vermont, I think, University of Vermont law school, and they moved to Topeka, Kansas, and he became a judge. And so, yeah, they were. She did a little practicing of law, but by and large, she was an independent sort of person. And so sadly, sort of, my mother felt that she was never lived up to the quality of her mother's activities and so forth, which is just not true. They were different sorts of things that she did. But yeah, so she had a degree, and my father had a degree from the Colorado School of Mines, which he got because that was the only way that he would be given permission to marry Mom. That was understood, that you needed to be educated. If you, his father had offered to give him a taxi cab. He was a renowned preacher and would go around the world, huge crowds. Very successful guy. So anyway, Dad got himself a degree, and off to Alaska they went as soon as he got his degree, and they got married and off to Alaska.
Sounds like you were lucky to have been adopted into that family.
I was very lucky to be adopted into the family.
Yeah.
I've always thought that. That's just absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. So tell us some more about Stanford in 1962.
Okay, I went to Stanford, and I had been reading stuff in the summer about Stanford. Sent all sorts of stuff about getting prepared and various pre-school activities that were available, and I'd been reading material on biology and biochemistry, and that seemed really fascinating. And in high school, I loved chemistry and I loved math. I never really had a biology class. Anyway, it seemed, so this was like biochemistry, and it was very interesting. So I went to Stanford. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to take biology or take chemistry. And I ended up taking chemistry first. I was going to take them both. So I took chemistry, and that was the end of it. I became a chemical engineer, and 4 years. I did very little at Stanford other than studying, and I didn't do much of the other activities that were available. And unlike my son, who also went to Stanford, who was much involved in all sorts of activities and got probably more out of the Stanford experience than I did. Anyway, I got through it. As it turns out, Connie, my wife, and I were in the same physics class, but we didn't know that. I mean, it's a huge class, and it was years later before I met her officially. And so after 4 years, I graduated with a chemical engineering degree, and went to work for Union Oil. I'd worked for them in the summer before, and so I just continued on, easy to continue on. And so I worked there for 3 years. And this was right in the Vietnam War period. And my deferment at Union Oil was not going to be renewed. And so I went in the Peace Corps. And I spent 3 years in Ghana, teaching in Kumawu, in about 15-25 miles from the largest city, Kumasi, and I enjoyed that, those 3 years. So I was there for 3 years, then I came back, and I went back to school, and I went back to my advisor, who had been in chemical engineering but had since moved to the design group within mechanical engineering. And so I came back and went, oh, well, here, I'll put you on my grant. Well, okay. So I went back to school, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do coming back. So I went to school and I got a doctorate degree in mechanical engineering in this design group. In the process, I had met Connie before I went to the Peace Corps, and when I came back, we got together again, and I got married.
Excellent.
And 52 years last January, maybe 53. And so then the question is, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to go? So I did my doctorate degree in optimization.
Excuse me, what does that mean? Optimization.
Finding the best possible way something could happen. So how does Amazon plan all of the package deliveries so that it's not just driving all over the place? So that's just a very simple example of optimization in terms of the best path that is in some way good. So you figure out what's the best thing to do, and then you figure out the variables that would make that work. So optimization, and there's all sorts of theory, and it's a fairly, at that time, fairly reasonably new study area. Doug Wild, who was my advisor, was well known in the optimization field. So I did some arcane thing with optimization and determining what's the best you could possibly do, and give you a sense of what you might be able to do, without having done all of the, this was to be an estimate sort of thing, make something more quickly than at that time optimization was a lot of calculations and so forth. Stuff that the computers today are such that all of this stuff is it's quick. Some of the things that we were doing were not, you wouldn't do them anymore like that. You just so the question was where to go, and so I went on a little tour arranged by Doug. I went to Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, and I gave a presentation, and I went to RPI and gave a presentation, and came back home, and I wasn't sure, I didn't get any nibbles from Wisconsin, but RPI said, sure, we'll put a Stanford graduate on our faculty. That's always a good thing to have.
What's RPI?
Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and it's located in Troy, New York. I believe it's Troy, and it is cold. It is miserable. In Colorado, it snows, and the snow's gone in 2 days in Denver. In Troy, anyway, so...
And I'm from Wisconsin, and I can tell you it snows there, too.
Yeah, so... and so I was in this design group of mechanical engineering, and one of the graduates from this group, McNeill Cooperwriter, he came every year for a workshop that was given by one of the faculty in the design group, a creativity sort of design idea. And Neil Cooperwriter was there, and we got to talking, and he said, there's openings at Arizona State University. You ought to apply. So, well, Arizona State University sounded better than RPI. My brother was a chemical engineer, and he was working with DuPont in Houston, and he was offering he could probably get me in a job with the company DuPont. Houston, oh man, I don't know. I'd been through Philadelphia in the summer, and it was miserable for the Peace Corps. So I applied to ASU, and I got accepted, and there was no question I was going to go to RPI if I had an opportunity at ASU. So in 1976, I accepted that and came here in August of '76.
And who hired you, Harry, at ASU?
Doug Metzger. Is Doug? I think it's Doug Metzger. Well, Daryl. It is Daryl Metzger. Yes, Daryl. He hired me, and at the time he hired me for the mechanical engineering faculty, so assistant professor, and he wanted me to teach a senior design class, and I'd become from the design group at mechanical engineering at Stanford. I must be able to teach this. And then a thermal systems design, a thermal lab class. And I had been helping with a thermal lab at Stanford. And the guy that ran that lab also ran a seminar, a workshop here in Tempe. And so and he was very happy with what I did. So it helped me get that job. So I was going to do these two things. The dean of school at this time was Lee P. Thompson, and he was assisted by George Beakley. Those guys were right out of Texas A&M. They were old school. I mean, they were old school guys, as was much of the faculty. Much of the faculty was I'll just call them old school. I was in mechanical engineering for 30 years. I did 30 years of work in the mechanical engineering department.
You were young blood, right?
I was
older faculty.
I was young blood. Neil Cooperrider was young, and there weren't a lot of.
It was very similar to my experience. Lots of young people coming in '76. I came in '77.
Yeah.
And older faculty about to retire.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some of these faculty didn't retire. They stuck around for quite a while, and so I taught. Design classes. I taught freshman design, and I taught the capstone design class in mechanical engineering. And sort of in between, I had a thing that was called intermediate design. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. And I got to do a thermal systems design class, which is what I really liked. And then I had one other class. It was dynamics that I had to teach. I didn't know much about dynamics. I mean, I was in mechanical engineering, but I was in the PhD program, I was in the master's program, and I was in this optimization area. I don't do any dynamics and optimization, not in the sense. I mean, conceivably you could if it was an important part of modeling. But so I did not have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, so I didn't have a mechanics class. I didn't have a strengths of materials class. I guess I had a little something. I did have a civil engineering water class. It was a good class. And so I had to teach this class. Well, my office partner was teaching, very knowledgeable. So I'd go to his class and hear what he was talking about, and we'd talk about it in the office. So I made it through that. I only had to do that once. I only had to teach this class once.
It sounds like there was a lot of emphasis on teaching. And I remember the 3 pillars of teaching, research, and service. How did that affect your early years?
Well, I made my interest turns out to be in engineering education. And that's where I probably spent 25 of my 30 years. Trying to work with engineering education as my interest, and earned much money in engineering education at that time. I think it's considerably better nowadays. The interest in actually thinking of engineering education as a field that one practices and understands. I did a lot of teaching is what I did primarily, and I did get promoted. I got promoted to a associate professor, but that was based on a lot of the service work that I did, and various committees that I worked on, of which I can't remember what they were anymore. But I done a lot of service work and helped the school in their accreditation efforts, that sort of thing. And so I was a little thin on publication and research. I think I only had one paper that was actually of the correct quality that would count for anything. So I was sort of lucky to get promoted, honestly. But I mean, I was an assistant professor for 20 years.
Oh.
Never heard of it. I mean, there's no such thing
anymore, right? For sure.
There isn't anything at that time either, really. I mean, and so, you know, finally I think it became well, you can't have, we're going to have to promote him.
And where was all this happening? What was the building like? Where were you housed?
Well, I housed on campus. I was in ERG, I guess. ERC, is it? It's the first building, engineering building. ECA, I guess. Is it EC? No, it's ECG. It was at ECG, third floor. And then we moved to the Engineering Research Center, which is a big building just next door, just east of ECG, by the library over there. Mm-hmm. And then finally in Goldwater, that got built. As I said, I had 25 years trying to get engineering education activities. And when I showed up in the senior design class, the capstone design, I showed up to teach it, and I looked out at these 10 students or 8, well, there weren't very many, and they had no idea. They didn't have a clue what they were going to do. And they knew they were going to work on a project, and they knew they were going to build something, but they didn't have any idea how they might go about. The curriculum was a set of skills. You learn how to do dynamics. You learn how to design mechanisms. You learn about heat exchangers, how to build one. But you don't, that's fine. You need all of that stuff. But there was no discussion about, well, how do you put all this stuff together? How do you actually do? Design was a process. It's not just a, I mean, these people were expected to sort of gin up these activities, and they didn't have any process that they could follow to do it. They'd heard a little, well, we got to do brainstorming or something. Anyway, so there, when I taught the freshmen design, so you think, well, when did they learn to do this stuff? Well, you looked at the curriculum, and there was the freshman engineering, and there's capstone design. You go, oh, great. It's 4 years between these two things. I teach the freshman design class, and what is it? It's a book by George Beakley, very popular book, mind you, very popular in the country, very popular book. It tells you what civil engineer does, it tells you what electrical engineer does, it tells you what a mechanical engineer does. It doesn't tell you anything about how they do any of that stuff. And it was a class where groups of students, I'm not going to call them teams, I just call them groups of students, took this class, did homework assignments, read about these various disciplines, and then at some point towards the end, they had a project. and they had to dream up a project to do. So they dream up some sort of, and they'd go into someone's garage and they'd fiddle around and then they'd build something. And there'd be very little, if any, thinking about what they were doing. They would just try this and try that and well, we'll do this and we'll do that. But there was, and you go, well, okay, this is the starting point for the engineering curriculum, and it has nothing to do with design at all. It's just, it's garage work. And the guy that had the father with a machine shop in the garage would come into the wonderful stuff that was machined and wonderful. And the people that didn't have a father that had a machine shop in the garage, they came with things nailed together with tape and they did the best they could. But anyway, so you've got freshmen you're not teaching any design. You've got the capstone design where they're expected to create something really wonderful. Eventually, we convinced that the mechanical engineering, the college, that there needed to be something in the middle. There needs to be something in the middle. And so we somehow convinced the faculty to approve a intermediate design class that had a design process flavor and communications. So it was a combination, design, communication. So, and I co-taught that with Maria Ziner. She was in communications. I learned a lot about how one actually needs to prepare for your oral presentations and again, it was one of these things where I had just been going along. No one ever showed me the approach or what you want to think about or what's good and what's bad. This is where I was finally, you tell the people what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. It's a nice sandwich. This is the way you do things.
Right.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, but I didn't know that was so I learned a lot from Marie Ziner on that. So we had this intermediate class, and that where we began to introduce some of the quality. This was during the areas of quality emphasis. Deming and others who were trying to get quality. What does quality mean, and how do you get quality into your product? And how do you talk to your customer to find out what they need? How do you convince? So that was trying to introduce them to that at the junior level sort of thing, so that when they got to be the capstone design, they'd have the tools necessary. I wouldn't have to, because what we were doing was spending a third of the class teaching them what they needed to know so they could do the project they were going to work on. So that effort to move the faculty to a realization that we needed to have design, and we needed a better freshman class. Mm-hmm. We need this intermediate class, and so that when the capstone design comes along, they're at least prepared better to try and tackle these issues. As a side issue, I had never been taught how to teach anything. When my kids were in 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they were in soccer. And the first day we went to my son's soccer group, they didn't have a coach. Well, they had two guys that didn't want to be the coach. They were willing to help, and they knew they were soccer players, and so I was the coach of this soccer team. So, and these guys put up with me with my whatever I saw. I just went and we had this. Well, then I bought a book.
How to teach soccer?
Yes, a book on how to teach soccer. And I began reading this book. And the very first thing it was talking about was, you got to plan your practice. That was a thought. And so I read about planning your practice and setting objectives and setting times and setting. I said, this sounds like teaching.
Great analogy. That's really good.
So finally, I had some insights into what would make a good teaching environment. That I needed to prepare. I wasn't preparing anywhere near as much for the classes as I was for the soccer.
Did you require your freshmen to read the soccer book as well? That would have been good.
No, but so we have engineering students who don't know anything about engineering when they get to be seniors, and I realized at the time Stanford didn't give me any. I had lots of skills, but they never taught me how to think about the dynamics. It was an important part of this freshman class, and it was an important part of the intermediate class, and it was expected in the senior level that they would know the things that they do as a group to turn it into a team. And so that they could function effectively as a team, and not because a group is just a group, and they might stumble onto something.
That sounds like good real-world practice.
It
right?
is.
You in the real world have to work often as a team, I would think. As an
They
engineer.
do, but the thing is, at that time, having a teaching and having teams in your classroom was not the way you did it. You sit them in chairs and you lecture to them with a good plan that you had in advance, of course, and they take their notes and you give them their but you don't interact with each other. You don't have one guy help this person over here. You don't have any team efforts at all in the classroom, and that I don't know how much of that is done even today in the classrooms, but I think there's a lot more willingness to accept that we can have in dynamics, we can have a team. Some part of this can be a team effort. There can still be your individual effort and whatever, but there can be some teamwork that enhances. It's certainly in the elementary schools. And they're you can't go to an elementary school or a middle school without having teams. They're just teams all over the place.
Right.
And that's just the way it's taught now. And so that flavor was what we were trying to get going. Trouble with the class with 3 sections, 3 2-hour sections, was the number of faculty required was large, and we had 3 sections,
How were your students changing at that time? I mean, were you beginning to have more certainly out-of-state students and even international students? Did that affect
I don't know.
No?
Certainly, if I wasn't aware of international students and being more involved, that's probably a graduate level thing, a little more than undergraduate. But no, I didn't notice that. Wasn't thinking about that in the class, in the classroom. So the students, they were. It's hard for me to say. I mean, the faculty all complained that the students couldn't do anything. They came out of high school and they were worthless, sort of things almost. I didn't see that particularly, so I didn't have a sense that they were coming unprepared into the school. So the freshman engineering class, it just couldn't. It wasn't universally accepted. It wasn't. This is great news, man. Why haven't we been doing this for 20 years? And let me sign up to teach one of these sections. it was pulling teeth. The modeling part of the class was done in groups of 40, and so we need to have something like 12 faculty members that would teach that, and then the concepts were classes of 80 and 120. They were down there in the Commons building, the second floor. They got a big open area in there. That's where we were teaching. So you didn't need as many teachers, but you still needed to have six teachers to cover those sort of large section lab sorts of things. And so it went for a few years. I mean, we're talking about mid-90s now. You know, and I'm trying to think back when I was thinking about coming here and talking today about this thing. I don't know how we got there exactly. I can't believe that we had this George Beakley freshman class going on for 20 years. If that's, because I was thinking, oh, well, we did this in the 80s. And I was, wait, my daughter went through the first one of these things in the 90s. So this wasn't this. So I've just lost track of how we went from here to there, but and how we were able to convince the school that there needs to be these changes in the curriculum. The assessment of the students in the freshman class was we did A, B, C, D, E. That just didn't break it for engineering design, and so we said, okay, here's the deal. This goes back to the soccer stuff. We've got some goals here that we want you to accomplish during the course of the semester, and if you can accomplish and this is how we're going to measure it. And if you can accomplish those goals, we'll give you a B in the class. Just give you a B. Now, occasionally you may do something just really extraordinary. You may put in an effort that's just beyond the pale, and you may bring in something. Okay, well, you exceeded my expectation. I expected you to do this, and you gave me this. And so, you do that. You don't have to do that all the time, but if you do that some of the time, occasionally, I'll give you an A in the class. If what you turn in isn't quite up to snuff, you get the dreaded needs improvement.
Oh.
But that just means you turn it in again. You need to turn it in, and you need to do it. You need to demonstrate. I don't care. It'd be great if you did it the first time, but if it takes 2 efforts, that's all I really care about. Is by the end of the semester, you've demonstrated that you can do this sort of thing. And so we had this needs improvement, and so some of the students would get needs improvement.
That sounds really smart, right?
and they can reapply. And I know my daughter still uses that mentality in the teaching that she does today.
Your daughter, who incidentally is now a professor at ASU, is that right?
Is now a professor at ASU. Yes, in the Fulton School of Engineering.
Incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible.
Yeah. That's great.
She's far better teacher than I ever was.
Well, she had the soccer experience as a soccer coach, right?
Yeah. Jennifer and Kent, my son, had to sit through dinners with Connie and me talking about quality and Deming and how it impacts. Connie was doing it in the computer area, and both of those two have it sunk in. Jennifer was not. She accepted it there at the table. Kent was very interested in that, and it's very clear that in there that they absorbed this quality material and what it means to have quality, and so we lost the ECE, the Introduction to Engineering class. It listed for 5 years or something, and then it just died away. You know, I'm thinking maybe it was ABET, the accreditation organization for engineering, that forced the school to revise the freshman engineering course, and because ABET came up with, as the quality movement, they came up with learning objectives in a variety of areas that you needed to demonstrate. If you're going to be an accredited program, your students need to master these, and so they didn't say how you measure these things, but they said you've got to demonstrate that your student. And what they did in the past to do that, basically, was they put together notebooks of homework, and these accreditors would go, and they still do that, but they go through these notebooks and try and see whether the students have demonstrated the ability to use calculus, and they demonstrate the various skills that ABET wants us to have. Awareness of national and international issues, awareness of problems in safety. Where have they? And so when you think about how do you measure and assess, what scale are you on? Well, we settled on, and this is Lynn Bellamy and myself in the freshman class, but also we just used it. We came across this thing called Bloom's taxonomy of learning, as a psychologist somewhere, and he had 6 or 7 levels of learning, and the bottom level, I'm not sure I remember all of the names. The bottom level was you could write a definition. All right. And then the second level, you could do homework problems. This was it concepts? It's called it. You could do homework problems successfully. All right. So that's a level of understanding of thermodynamics. Here's a homework problem. You go, whatever you do, you figure out how to solve this thermodynamics problem, this heat transfer problem. All right, it's a standard approach, so you're going to be asked to determine the temperature of the liquid coming out the end. All right, well, you go look in the book and you do that. All right, that's fine. So that's a level of understand. That's an ability to do the analysis. The next level is the ability to recognize when that's the right thing to do. See, homework problems, you don't have to recognize that you're supposed to do heat transfer, solve a problem, because you just read a chapter on this, and this chapter tells you what you're supposed to do, and so you just do it. But now the trick is, when you get to a problem that you reckon, oh, this is a thermodynamics problem. I need to apply some thermodynamics issue to it, of which I know how to do. And so that's the level that you want to be at. Now the next level up, which is nice, is not only do you recognize what to do, you recognize why that's what you want to do. You recognize why this is an important thing and how it works and why you're doing it the way it is. Not that you just know how to do it, because you may just go back and get it out of your textbook, which is fine. As long as you recognize it, it doesn't say where you get your information. But at the next level up, you really understand why this is working, why this is this method and not another method, and so that's an analysis level. That's it'd be nice, but maybe a little bit beyond what. And so in engineering, in mechanical engineering, we set learning objectives for these ABET outcomes using Bloom's taxonomy, or a modification of Bloom's taxonomy. And so this is the last thing here, the capstone design class, we started the assessment fair. And the assessment fair would have teams of assessors, faculty member, and 2 members from industry, 2 engineers from industry, would come in and assess the students' efforts, capstone efforts. And they'd get the students' report at the end. The students in our class, they have to build something. Now, it doesn't have to be the entire thing. It can be some part. This is the one that we're not going to model quite. We need to do something. We need to build something and demonstrate that what we have in mind will work, even if it's not the entire. But most of them build an entire sort of prototype. So they have the prototype. They have the report. They have an oral presentation they have to give. And they sit down and we give them the learning objectives that we're looking for, and we're looking for this level, and, this is what these levels are. How would you assess their oral presentation? Do you assess it as being acceptable, as being they really they have to be told to do it, but not expecting analysis particularly. Where a student would go, oh well, this is blah blah. This is why we're doing it this way, and this is why. But they go through and they look and see where do they show calculus? Okay, they demonstrated the ability to use calculus in a problem, in solving what they're trying to do. And some of them will go beyond that. You clearly they understand more than just how to do it. They understand why they're doing that. So they go and assess it, and they turn the information into there's a form, turn it into the office, the mechanical and aerospace office, and they use that information to see how well the program is doing. Are we up to snuff on communication, on written communication? Are we up to snuff on the various objectives? And if not, well, then that's where we're going to need to do something about the curriculum. There's something in the curriculum. And so that's what we can show ABET. And so we can show ABET year after year, because we do this every year. And we can continuous improvement. That's this idea of continuous improvement, that we're monitoring and we're going to improve it. And so that's something that we were able to, this assessment fair, which is something that basically, I didn't make it, I didn't create it, but I got it going here in the mechanical engineering department, and it's still going on. They probably just had the assessment fair, but now it's huge. I mean, we had the assessment fair with 6 teams, and now it's mechanical engineering has like 20 teams, and these teams are no longer 3 and 4; they're 5 and 6 students. I mean, the department is just huge, and so that assessment fair is something that's of all the things that I was trying to get done, trying to accomplish. That one is still going on. They're still using that in the department. And I don't know whether the other departments are doing anything similar to that or not. I have a feeling they are. So honestly, the environment that I was in, these faculty weren't that interested in teams. They weren't interested in design. They weren't interested in engineering education, and it was a sort of they're not hostile exactly, but they're not supportive. I think that changed quite a bit by the time I retired. I think there was more faculty, more sort of realization that this has got some merit to it, but it was by and large it wasn't easy being in the mechanical engineering department. These guys were
guys, almost all guys.
Almost all guys. A couple of women. Couple of women.
Now there's your daughter. That's good.
Yeah, I got my daughter. Yeah, mechanical.
Did you see the faculty changing over all of those years?
Well, certainly
there more women coming in?
There were certainly more women coming in, but they weren't There were more women in the
Minority.
program. Yes,
Oh.
definitely.
Mhm.
On the faculty, maybe. There certainly were more than when I was. I don't think there were any women on the faculty when in '76.
Interesting.
And there were probably 3, 4, maybe something like that. Maybe a little more than that. And the faculty's pretty big now.
Well, it sounds like you made a huge impact on just the curriculum and the way everybody thought about how.
I hope so.
was being taught, right?
I think so. I was talking to Connie this morning as we were out walking, and she felt at the retirement dinner or luncheon or whatever luncheon we had, that was the case. That I don't remember that. I don't remember that. You remember the bad stuff, not the good. And so that's what she was saying. And so one hopes that's the case.
Tell me more about just engineering in general, how much it has grown at ASU. I mean, there's now, you name in some of your notes, EGC, EGR, EG everything. I mean, there's so many phases and buildings.
Well, yeah, the engineering program is huge. And it's hardly huge because of online. Online, the last ASURA scholarship students are online. Students that live in California. So I don't have any sense of the size of the program. I know that these assessment fairs, I've stopped doing the assessment fair. I did one last year, and I think that'll probably be my last one. The younger people can go ahead and enjoy the reading these papers. They still haven't learned how to write a report. That just really gets me. Year after year we say, this is not a good report.
Now they have AI to help.
That's true. That's true. So I don't know how big it is, but it's very large. Clearly, it's a big school. Incredibly successful, very successful.
Beyond telling them to come to ASU, what kind of advice would you give young people considering engineering as a career?
Well, I guess I was thinking about that. I don't give any advice to anybody, as far as I know. If I had to, I think I'd just tell them to, I'm not sure I'd recommend just engineering. I'd tell them to they should major in something that they enjoy doing, whatever that is. And if you enjoy doing math and chemistry or physics, then maybe engineering is what you should do. But you ought to do, for your degree, you ought to do something that you enjoy doing. There's plenty of time, as it turns out, once you get your degree, to find out what it is you really want to do. But you need that degree. You need that degree. And so if so find something that you enjoy doing, and then that's what you want to major in, because otherwise it's a drag, and you may not finish it, and that's just a waste of time then. So anyway, I was thinking about, I don't give much advice, but that would be, if I were asked, that would be the advice. Find a major in an area that you enjoy doing. If you like that work, then that's what you ought to be for your degree, because you can change. Lots of people change their work after they graduate.
So after you graduated from ASU and became a retiree, I think one of the things that you must have enjoyed, because you certainly did a lot of it, was get involved in the ASU Retirees Association, which is sponsoring this video history interview.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. How you got interested and involved.
It's okay. I know where I was standing in my house, just off the living room in a hallway. I know where I was standing when Connie came back from an ASURA board meeting and said, something like this, that they've asked if I would be willing to be vice president. If I were to accept that, big if, would you chair the Retirees Day Committee? And I said, sure. And well, she decided to be vice president and so forth and so on, and I chaired this committee. Then one day at the meet and greet, I'm looking for people who could be on this committee. And who should appear walking by? Why, it's Jan Thompson. She's a brand new member here of the organization. So we talked a little bit about retirees and what I said. And the thing was that, you know, there's no such thing as a volunteer jail. And Jan says, okay, well, all right. So Jan joined the Retirees Day Committee to start her career into ASURA. And we had very many, I still had enough thoughts about how things should be or could be organized, how committees could work from the work in engineering. Mm-hmm. So I tried to use that in the Retirees Day, and we had a successful run for 3 years. And then the membership just didn't, they weren't showing up for this committee, and we had to cancel it. We had Crow's wife as one of the presenters, and she was going to be presenting to 5 or 10 people. No. I don't think so. No. I don't think that's going to be the case, and so the canceling of that was part of the reason that I had with Bill Moore. I think there was one other person did the survey. Mm-hmm. We put together a survey to find out what members want and what they think about ASURA. And then I went through the analysis of all of the data that suggested that Retirees Day seminars were the things that people would seem to be interested in, not Retirees Day. And so I joined the crew there as I tell you, I can still see, I'm standing right there when Connie asked me about that. Oh man, I don't know. Okay, so, you know, after that I became a utility board member. I was voted onto the board by the board 3 times over the years before I was finally elected in I think it was 2018 or something like that. And that was the first time that I was actually elected. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this work. We had a couple of things that were really nice were e-news, the monthly newsletter that we had, and we have. I sent out something. I went to the board meetings, and the board would have a jolly old time talking about this and talking about that and these all the items. And then those are the people that was as far as it ever went. You know, there were the minutes, but who reads minutes? Nobody reads the minutes of these board meetings. But I actually do go back and read them, but nobody reads those. And so I put out one little, as a president, I put out and quote what turned out to be e-news about something in a board meeting, and then we didn't do anything for a while, and Joe Madonna became the official first editor of e-news, and she did that till 2017, I guess it was, and then I took over, and that was a fun thing for me. I looked forward to the monthly events, and listening and writing it up in my own. As I got more and more comfortable doing it, I got maybe a little too comfortable doing it. I'm not sure. And so that I've just retired from that, and I've transformed into a new e-news editor. So that was a fun thing. Another thing that was fun to do was the book, the third generation book. I remember the board meeting upstairs in East, whatever that building used to be called. Upstairs, we were in the room, and the question of whether we wanted to have a third book. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Well, Will Stacy. Part of the issue was that Will Stacy had choked up, offered a sizable sum of money to get it published. Okay, but I don't. The last book had been written by a number of authors, and getting them all together, and I think Val Peterson, I think, was the overall editor of that, and getting it all together, and it just seemed like continual difficulties in getting it put together. But he put together and got a nice book out of that second edition. First edition was just one person that did the whole thing. So the day after that staff meeting, or that board meeting, Connie and I are out walking, and we're talking about this thing. We can do something. That wouldn't be that hard. I mean, they get a little bit. So we went back and said, well, we'll do it. Just the two of us. And that was, and Jan read these things and helped us immensely. And there were a couple of other people that read this book, and it was so much fun to put and Connie with her pictures. We're not putting this book together without lots of pictures, and it needs to be printed in color. And so that was that was really worth the effort that we put into that. We still have copies if you want to.
It's incredible, and it's a book covering 10 years.
10 years.
The first book is the first 10 years of ASURA, and the second is the second 10 years, and theirs is called The Third Decade of Success, and it truly was a success.
It was our engineering website sort of thing, and so that was we had a lot of help. Connie created pages that someone could fill, like a form, and so the obituaries, they filled in a form. You got new obituary filled in a form. Carl Cross and Minner filled in this form over and over and over and over and over again, and that moved the obituaries over to the new site. And there was a form that could be filled for the past events, and Pat Schneider filled in all the past events on this form. So they weren't creating they were creating pages, but they weren't creating from scratch. They had this nice form that they did. So that was a huge effort, and the university people were just blown away with what we could do, what we had done, what Connie had done.
Talk about help for volunteers.
Then, when that got done in like January, and in December, in September, we said, we've got all of this information about how to do things. There's a little bit over here, there's a little bit over here, there's something over there. It's probably all on Wild Apricot, computer program, computer database. It's scattered all over the place. Some of it's not complete. We don't have any information about how to do mailing. And so, in an effort to bring it all together and fill in the gaps, so that when someone retires or someone leaves or whatever, they know what has been done in the past. Doesn't have to be the. So we started this for volunteers, and we began pulling together all of this stuff off of the. And so we created this website for volunteers. So now the president knows what has been done, how it's been done, has the calendars available. All of that information is available on this website, and that we're still working on that website right now, and adding to it, modifying it. Some of the stuff it's already out of date. Things change, and so.
It's one of the things that helped me the most when I was the president. One of the reasons I said yes is that there was a month-by-month list of tasks. This is what you will do in September when you're the president, in October, November, and that seemed very kind of doable just to follow that outline. But without it, I'd
at
a loss. It was so helpful.
Yeah, you just make it up yourself. I mean, and that's so we're it is. I'm glad that was the idea.
Absolutely worked.
And to me, when I was president and I needed to fill some committee, well, I didn't have any idea what the video history group. Well, I don't exactly know what the video history group does, and how can I recruit somebody to a committee that I'm just totally unfamiliar with? And so I get information in there, and so I needed to collect that information. So I talked to scholarship. How does the scholarship process work? How do the people that do the special events? What do they do? How does the office process all of this stuff? These event registration forms and stuff. How do you process them? What do you do with them? And so. I asked Carolyn, and I asked what's her name? Linda, and they wrote up how they were doing it, what they were doing, but it was so I had been collecting this information, but it wasn't particularly available, easily available. So that was. It's been keeping me busy, and we do a little bit more of it. As I say, we're still working on that right now. That was probably the best thing, probably more important than the regular web page, honestly.
Well, you've been an incredible I think of you as one of the godfathers of ASURA, for sure.
Well, the U of A's Retiree Association is gone.
Right.
It's toast.
Right.
NAU still has something, but it's not very much, and yet here we are with 600, 800 members, and we're going along. We went through COVID. We managed to make it through without just disappearing. I think COVID is what did in U of A. But see, they couldn't get any officers. One of the questions on there is the changes in the university, and the perception of U of A versus ASU is, to me, the biggest change that's occurred since I've been here. I mean, we went from being the party school and not the school of choice of anybody. If you had any sort of academic views, you go to U of A. And that's just not the case. I mean, the school is just incredibly successful and huge and far superior. I guess I'm not exactly a non-biased opinion, but far, far, far better than the U of A. U of A is just scraping along down there in Tucson. They sort of fit into the environment in Tucson, as far as I'm concerned. We're in a metropolitan, dynamic, growing area here, and we're taking a good advantage of it.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add? That was a good ending, though, already, I think, about just the assessment of how much ASU has grown in reputation since
I think that's
your tenure.
more than enough to
All right.
fill up the airways with.
All right.
I certainly enjoyed this. I was concerned, but, I can't remember everything,
You did well.
but you did a really nice job. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you agreeing to be my interviewer.
I learned a lot, and I learned about some of our parallels that I'll tell you about later. Thank you very much, Barry.
You're welcome.